Well, thank you, first of all, for inviting me here. I'm super excited to be here. I got a chance yesterday to kind of roam around Omaha and check out all of the amazing coffee places, see some of the new neighborhoods that are popping up. So it's my first time in the Midwest, and I'm definitely coming back. I'm very excited. In terms of the work that we do, we work in emerging markets right now. What we're doing is really solving the problem of financial identity and visibility, I would say, in emerging markets. So currently there's about 2.5 billion people around the world that don't have a financial identity or credit score. And what that means is that they don't have access, like the rest of us do, to formal financial markets. They're pretty much invisible to financial institutions and banks. And so we wanted to solve that problem. So we've developed an Android platform that both scores these individuals, but through those scores, we actually do the lending ourselves and have developed a wide range of financial products and credit products to help them enter that financial marketplace and to make them visible to the world.
That's awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, as we get into this, I want to hear a little bit about your story. I know that you probably didn't grow up dreaming about being a CEO of kind of a tech company. What do you think in your childhood has helped play into some of the things that you're doing right now?
So I also brought some slides with me to make this a little easier. So when I was growing up, I was really, really obsessed with comic books. I didn't just love the fact that comic books were about, the good guys usually winning, but it was really around the fact that, ordinary people could have the extraordinary ability to save the world.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was about those heroes actually finding their secret potential and using that potential for good. So I pretty much decided when I was little that either I was going to become a superhero or become a CIA agent. I don't know. To me, the two seemed really exciting. But I think more practically, really what influenced the work that we do is my mom. So my mom is a doctor in Brooklyn, and one of the things I've always seen from her is how she's used her profession to help others in the community and how she trusts people inherently. And kind of growing up as an only child, what I noticed with my parents is that they really gave me that key understanding of the differences in the resources and opportunities that all of us are given. And kind of knowing that, what I kind of decided my mission was to figure out how, despite the fact that we all start in different places, how could we really level that playing field and bring the unique value of each person out into the world? And how can we prove that value to people?
That's huge, because just yesterday we heard from a guy, I think Brett, and he had this quote where it really stuck and resonated with exactly what you're experiencing, where he said talent is really universal, but opportunities are not. And so that was exactly what you're discovering. That's although you came from a family that gave you some opportunities, not everybody was starting at the same place. Well, where did the specific idea for InVenture come from? Obviously, you changed gears, and so when did that ball start to drop in your life?
So, I think the other thing I would say is that I never thought of InVenture as, I'm going to become a CEO and I'm going to, start a company. I really set out to do this to solve a problem. And so because of that, I did do a lot of different things before I started. So I worked in investment banking, I worked in microfinance, I studied econometrics and health economics, then I went to go work at the UN Population Fund, then I went back into investment banking. But all of those different experiences really allowed me to kind of pull from everything and bring that to the solution that we have. And I would say the biggest thing was when I was working at the UN Population Fund, I had the opportunity to interview about 4,500 different individuals around how they use microcredit and whether that was really solving their problems. Was it really improving their quality of life? So this is one of the women that I had interviewed in India, and I think for me it really brings back a lot of memories, because what I realized from that experience was not obviously discovering the problem, but what I realized was that a lot of times we have to go out and get the data ourselves, right? We can't rely on third parties, and so despite the fact that it took me almost 3 years to get this kind of information and to really dive into understanding the problem, I did realize that if you can build your solution not using other third-party data, but to really go get the data from people themselves, you are then kind of part of the solution, right? You know these people, you know their lives, you know their problems really intimately. And so the problem that I did discover is twofold. One was really around the credit scores, and so these people did not have any identity. They were not visible to the world, and what that meant is they had no paper records, they had no documentation of their credit histories and whether or not their businesses were successful. The other piece of it is they were also very hard to reach, right? So they're in pretty rural areas, and so it's costly for us to actually go and visit them and to do 4,500 interviews.
Right.
No one can really do that.
No.
And so a lot of banks were not thinking about them as having purchasing power and having value, and so they were not developing customized solutions to meet their needs. So I realized, okay, we had to figure out a way to bring this data to life. Luckily, there are smartphones in everyone's hands now. So the first solution that we developed in order to get that data was around just using simple technology, using SMS, so text messaging and voice response systems in order to get people's income and expense information. And what we realized is if we could look beyond just kind of what's happening in their businesses and income and expense data, and if we started to really think about individuals' daily lives, where is that information, right? Right now, if we think about it, all of our daily life is actually being mapped on our phones. And so that was kind of core to our solution is could we actually put the solution into people's hands and gather the data directly from those devices. So the first solution was called Insight, and it was working pretty well. We'll kind of get into what changed, but from there we realized that there's now about 1 billion smartphones in emerging markets alone. So we were able to then gradually move our solution from simple feature phone technology to smartphone technology and seamlessly now bring in that data. We bring in that data in about 20 seconds, and on average we bring in about 10,000 different data points on each individual. Using that data, we turn it into a credit score, and then we have decided to actually take the first risk on these individuals. So to date, in just the last year, we've done 250,000 loans.
Wow. That's incredible.
Thanks.
Very cool.
And I think what we find to be really exciting is that, again, these are not traditional FICO scores. This is the daily life of individuals. And our repayment rates are above 90%, which is in line with traditional bank repayment rates.
Incredible. You're not giving people handouts, but hand-ups, because that's absolutely what they're going to need to continue, build a business, or even just function as an individual. So talk to me about how you made this transition into a really human-centered design approach, and why does that matter to you personally? Why does that matter to what you're doing with InVenture?
Sure. So we have a little video. At InVenture, our mission is to create a global credit score for anyone with a mobile phone. Well, the reason I started InVenture was really because I saw that there was a gap in the market. I saw that these micro-entrepreneurs that were working so hard to be able to grow their businesses and help create jobs felt really stuck. They were getting access to these really informal microloans, but beyond that point, they couldn't get access to any kind of formal financial institution. And when I went to the other side of the market and interviewed financial institutions, what I found was they felt that these micro-entrepreneurs or individuals transacting in cash were too risky. And so they didn't want to provide capital to them. What I wanted to do was change that perception and to really be able to bring in real data to be able to show that these individuals are not risky and that there is so much potential sitting there that we really should break down that barrier.
We are currently running a business called Bunola's Fast Food.
I run a company called The Great Andres Catering Equip.
My business is a Splash Car Wash.
I'm operating an internet cafe.
Insight works on any phone. An entrepreneur would use Insight on a daily basis. They would text in their daily income, their daily expenses, and then what we send them back is basically a really simplified income statement. So it actually shows them how much money they made today, how much they spent today, and what their daily profit is. And so in that sense, they get this kind of summary or awareness saying, okay, today was a good day, today was a bad day, but they know what they're now working towards.
It actually makes you aware all the time of how things are going in your business in terms of revenue, expenses, and profit.
I can see where I spend the most.
Now I can see, okay, I don't need to spend this much on this. I don't need to spend this much on that.
I save a lot of time just by sending an SMS.
But in addition to that, what Insight provides to them is that formal proof and that formal identity that they can then take to a financial institution to ask for that growth capital to grow their business.
If I grow, Insight will be able to show these people that I'm growing.
I was fortunate to find this system at the beginning, because all my transactions have been recorded, and now I can tell a story about the performance of my business.
Just getting to now see people using Insight has been just remarkable. It's something that I designed when I was working full-time, kind of in my little office, thinking of myself as kind of a mad scientist trying to bring this data out into the world. But to actually see the fact that it's changing people's lives.
We have a lot of opportunities here.
Once it's formalized, then I can go to big companies.
We like to expand in such a way that we have more branches.
So in the near future, my plans is to do catering as well.
The plan of extending the place just to make it bigger, put more workstations.
I know it's gonna take time, but it's all about having patience,
They're actually getting small business loans to grow their businesses and employ people. We've seen that people are now doubling their savings. We've seen that, we see entrepreneurs that have had buckets of receipts, before using something like this, and now they have a simple income statement on their mobile phone. But I think the really simple stories that we've seen are just people telling us that, now as a result of using Insight, they actually know how much money they have, how much money they make on a daily basis. And that kind of awareness, to me, is just the biggest thing that we could have done. Now that they have that awareness, they have the abilities to really grow their businesses themselves.
So cool. Shivani, you could hear it in one of those men's lives. He literally I was so thankful that I found your program early on in his business. You could just feel the appreciation for what you had started in your office and how it was impacting his life thousands of miles away. So tell us some of the more inspirational stories that you've been able to come across because this has played out.
Sure. So one thing I did want to add is, so that was our first product, right? That was what we called Insight. And it was a really simple text messaging and voice response system that allowed people to both get that kind of accounting statement, but then in addition to that, it gave us the data we needed to develop a credit score and bring that to a financial institution. And so we did that between about 2013 to about 2014. And then two things happened. The first thing was I was in Nairobi, and I was doing a training with one of our customers. His name was William. And I'm sitting there, I'm showing him kind of how to use the product. I'm like asking him if he likes it, if he's going to use it, and he's like, "Oh, this is great. I'm really excited to use it. Thank you so much." And right before I leave the shop, he's like, "Thank you again. This is awesome, but I just have one question." I was like, "Okay, what's the question, right?" He's like, "Well, ma'am, I would love, if you had an app for this instead." And I was like, "What?" And from his back pocket, he brings out a smartphone. And I'm like, "Wow, I just spent over an hour sitting here with you, training you on how to use this product on your feature phone. Why didn't you tell me that you had a smartphone this whole entire time?" And he just looks at me like straight in the eyes, and he's like, "Well, you never asked." And I was like, "You're totally right. The point is that I didn't." And I kind of made that assumption that, having done all this work in rural areas, having done all these interviews, thousands of those interviews, living in those areas, I myself was making assumptions on our customers, right? And I think kind of to do the work that we do, given the fact that our headquarters are here in Santa Monica, we do have local teams on the ground, but a lot of times you have to go above and beyond to make sure you're not making those assumptions, right? It's really about, like we're saying, designing from the person up and really taking that approach of understanding your customers and adapting and changing your product along with the market. So after that story with William, anytime we went to another training, we would say, put up all of the devices that you have, literally just like having people put both hands up in their air, asking them what phones they were using. And we really did start to see that there was this transition that was happening. In emerging markets right now, there are 1 billion smartphones. And then, if we go one step further than that, people, we're just starting to get onto Venmo and Apple Pay and things like that, but there are 300 million mobile money accounts in emerging markets right now. I think it's about, I would say, $1.6 billion of GDP in Kenya is actually transacted through mobile money. So, in some ways, people are far more advanced than we are. And so it's a lot of, sometimes I think it's not just assumptions, but actually judging people in an unfair manner. So what we realized is that once we could actually shift the product to smartphones, not only did it make our lives a lot easier, but it actually made the lives of our customers easier, because now they're not actually punching in every single day and having to put in their revenue and expense information. We can seamlessly bring in all of that data in about 5 seconds. So now I can go on to the next piece, but I just wanted to make the point that as entrepreneurs and people starting businesses, we really do have to make sure we're not judging our own market.
Yeah, I want to hear more stories of what it would actually look like as it plays out in people's lives. But one of the things that you're going to collect with your smartphone is you're going to start to see things that other people aren't going to see. And so that's going to be helpful to understand. I think for all of us is like, what kind of data are you collecting and seeing in people that maybe other financial institutes aren't going to see?
Sure. So I have a really good example of one of our customers. She's one of my favorite customers. I shouldn't say that, but she is. Her name is Jennifer, and she's 65 years old. She's been in our system, in our platform now for a little over 1.5 years. She found out about the product from her son. Her son basically came home, bought her a smartphone, and he's like, you need to download this application now. And she's like, no, this will never work for me. And it did, right? It ended up what she felt like it was magic. But Jennifer, I think the way I want to describe this is that she is not a typical customer, right? She had no previous loan history before. Her savings balance was pretty low, and so to a traditional bank, Jennifer would have been rejected, right? All of these things in terms of having a low savings balance, being 65 years old and having a small food stall that was just making enough for her to get by every day, having no previous loan history, she wouldn't have even been seen by a bank. But for us, we saw a lot of other factors in her history that made her a very successful borrower. So some of those things that you guys might find interesting, one of them is the fact that we noticed she regularly makes phone calls to her family in Uganda, right? So we could see that she had the purchasing power to actually be consistent with making those phone calls. We also saw that she was running this food stall, and that for the most part, she traveled either between home and to the food stall. So we saw a lot of consistency in her travel patterns and her daily life. Another cool one, and this is something I think all of us can relate to, is thinking about how her phone book was organized, right? So when you think about your social networks, we think about it in 2 ways. There's your primary social network, and then there's your secondary social network. Facebook, Twitter, all of those networks are actually what you show the world, right? And in some ways, it's actually kind of your control. But when you look at your primary network in terms of your phone calls, who you send text messages to, and more importantly, who actually calls you and sends messages to you, that's the world interacting with you. That's you and the world interacting, as opposed to something only you can control. And so we actually think that's much more important than just social networks. And so what we saw with Jennifer is actually that she had this really, really large support network. And we find that if you have a support network that's usually at least 58 people, you are more likely to be a good borrower. So you're interacting with about 58 people at any given time. In Jennifer's case, she actually interacted with 89 different individuals throughout the week. So that kind of tipped her scale. But the other thing we looked at is kind of how does she even think about organizing that phone book itself? And we noticed that the majority of her contacts are actually listed with first and last name, right? So that would be Shivani Siroya instead of just Shivani. And we noticed that if your contact book is listed with first and last name more than 40% of the time, well, then you're 16 times more likely to be a good borrower.
That's really unfortunate because in my phone I have 17 Jasons. So, yeah, I didn't think I would have any friends growing up. So anyway, so it's a bad deal. But is that actually impacting how other markets, how other lenders you think are starting to see borrowers? Or is this primary stuff that you've just developed in your business?
I think that banks are now going to have to start thinking this way and have to start thinking about, I would say, customer service in general. But I do think that we have a unique opportunity here where it's not just about thinking about the customer, but it's about the relationship you have with them. And so the fact that we are on their phones, the fact that someone like Jennifer, she's not only been in the system for a year and a half, but she's taken out 30 loans at this point with us, right? So she's actually opened up another food stall. She's opening up an actual physical location of a restaurant, which was her lifelong dream. She's applied for a commercial loan now from an actual traditional bank. And so the point is that you have them for the long term, right? And so you're able to develop a better understanding and history with them about their behavior. And so we can take it one step further instead of actually only relying on those in-person interactions or voice interactions. We're actually able to be in her daily life, right? We're able to help her when she has times of emergency, when she's looking to grow her business, helping her, with what she wants, and that may be, buying a wedding gift for her son one day or buying a fridge the next day. But the point is actually being part of that entire financial life.
Yeah. Really glad you came back to her story. I was just kind of in the back of my mind thinking, I wonder how this story has ended. How fun for a 65-year-old woman who never probably saw this story coming, that because of this interaction with your software, literally is going to change, the final chapters of her life. Very cool. Where's InVenture going next? So you guys have kind of started with this basic primary technology of text messaging and voice. Now you went to smartphones. You're opening more channels there. What's next for you guys?
So I think what's next is we're obviously going to keep on expanding. Kind of to put it into perspective, one more time, is so again, there's 2.5 billion people that don't have a financial identity. In addition to that, there is a $3.1 trillion gap in unmet need for credit. Right? So that's across the board, and that's even here in the US. There are 70 million US residents that don't have a credit score. Right? And so I think the problems are, in emerging markets, but they're right here at home. And so I think for us, we are looking at ways that we can bring our technology back here, but just continue to refine what we think of as an identity and how that identity can be used not just within our system, but with other financial institutions and with bill payments, e-commerce, throughout the marketplace.
Yep. 2.5 billion people. I'm trying to get my head around that. Just how many Omahas that is if you stack that up. That is a ginormous population and just the financial need. It can kind of sound like you guys are trying to take on some of the larger, big industrial banking entities. What pushback have you had on that? And have people said, you're dumb to try to go after this? This thing has been this way for generations. So take us into some of those obstacles and things you're going to have to push into to do what you're doing.
Definitely, right? So the idea that, I think when we first started, the idea of the fact that your credit score could be developed in 20 seconds just using your mobile data is kind of mind-blowing to most people. I think the other thing that we were telling people is not only can we develop that credit score for them, but we can actually deliver capital to people in under 5 minutes, right? So sometimes I laugh about it because, I think we've developed something that we don't even have access to, right?
It's very true.
And we're doing that from the US and delivering that credit in places like Kenya, Tanzania, the Philippines. So it's, all the way across the world. So it is hard for people to get their minds around that. But I do think it's the fact that, one, we're showing them that it is actually working. So the fact that we have repayment rates that are in line with traditional banks, that's one big thing. I think it's the other thing is, we have retention rates, again, that show people that people love this product. So our retention rate is about 96%. So people stay on the platform. They really like it. And we are just continuing to hone in on what our customers want and how we can better serve them. And so in that sense, I think we're going to see a lot more competition, which we're excited about because it forces us to actually beat ourselves.
Yeah. That's awesome, by the way. Now, you guys can, What's your best advice for entrepreneurs who are just starting out? Obviously, at some point, one of the things that was fascinating, and even in your little video, was you literally built this software while you were working at another job. I try to get 2 things on Twitter every day while doing my regular job. So you've outpaced me. Thank you. That's not hard to do. But tell us a little bit about how would you give coaching to some of the people in this room that are probably a few phases behind where you're at. What would you say to those folks that have an idea like this, that have a problem they want to solve, that see a market, a hole in the market that they want to run after? What advice would you give to those people?
So I'd say 3 things. One, I would say you have to be passionate about the problem that you're solving. So that's the first thing, is that no matter what, to start a company, to do it for the long run, it has to be something that you deeply care about. I think the other piece for me has been, not only am I passionate about this, but I am someone who seeks information, so I like getting a lot of feedback. Before starting this, while I was working full-time, I also did crazy things, like I emailed about 1,500 people on LinkedIn because I just wanted to know if someone else was doing this. Right? I think it's also knowing not just about the problem you're solving and what solutions exist, but rather than you start something, maybe you can partner with someone else. Maybe there's a way that you can take your knowledge and bring that to another company. So I don't think starting something is always the solution.
Yep.
I think the second piece is about, I think, again, if you're starting something that no one's ever done before, it's kind of remembering that there are no comparables. So as much as I try to seek out information, a lot of our advisors and investors always tell us, like, you're doing this for the first time, like, you just kind of have to trust your gut. And so I was telling our team this last week. We were doing an all hands, and we were talking about our key performance indicators and how do we pick them, what are the assumptions behind them, and will we have to change them in the future? And what I said, it's kind of a stretch, but what I said was, our KPIs and the solutions that we have at hand, it's kind of like marriage, right? You pick these indicators based on the information you have at hand. Yep. Similar to marriage, when you go into it, you decide, this is the person I'm going to marry because I'm making it based on what I know about you now and how I feel now, right? But if you go into starting a company or a marriage and assume you're not going to get divorced, right? What you're going to do is really grow and evolve together, then you're not going to quit. And so I think in that sense, as a team, when you're starting it or as an entrepreneur, as long as you remember that it's not about quitting, it's just about adapting, evolving, and refining, then a lot of the stuff seems a little less scary.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. So you have a lot to be kind of proud of. You graduated from Columbia. You have built InVenture. You've developed a helpful team. You have stories to tell like Jennifer and William. Tell me, when you look back just at what you've been able to accomplish in this season, what are things that you are most proud of?
I would say the thing I am most proud of, it kind of goes all the way full circle for me, but it's about the fact that we are taking that first risk in people, and that what we're showing to people is that these are people that are worthy of our belief, right? And that they themselves are now starting to believe in each other. So I think at the end of the day, if we accomplished anything, it's about showing us that we can trust each other and that we actually all have the same data, that each of us has that unique value and that we should trust each other.
Yes, absolutely. Hey, Big Omaha, I want to open this up to questions for you guys. If you guys have questions for Shivani, go ahead and come up to the mics at this point, and love to hear from you guys. Shivani, while people are thinking about questions, I wanted to ask you, how big is your team? Just so we get a picture of where you office, what your typical week work looks like. Where do you guys office? How many people are on your team? Where are you guys at?
So the majority of our team is based in Santa Monica.
Okay.
We also have a team based in Nairobi, and then we have a small team now starting in the Philippines.
Okay. Total, how many people do you guys think are employed?
In total, we are a team of 41 people.
41 people. Wow. And how many years has it taken you guys to build to that level?
About 3 now.
3 years. Wow. Okay, that's a lot of hard. Go ahead.
I want to pick your brain a little bit about payments. I'm assuming these people don't have bank accounts either, otherwise they'd have more of a history. So how do you deposit funds into their account, and what do they usually use to make payments? I mean, here in the States, we think of Google Wallet and PayPal and all that, but I'm sure it's something else in foreign countries.
Sure. So in the markets that we're working in, we are piggybacking off of the mobile money rails. So very similar to the Venmos and the Apple Pays here, we're transferring the money directly into that mobile wallet. In emerging markets, most of those mobile money systems are owned by the telco themselves, and so it's tied to your SIM card.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Morgan Freeman. I do diversity and inclusion training, and I really appreciate what you're doing because you're going out to places where society says that there's third world countries and that they don't have the know-how, they don't have the education, they don't have the skill set to be able to do what they're doing. And you're going out and showing people not only are they doing this, not only are they successful, but we could help them be better. But I want to ask you about how preconceived notions about these countries and about these people, how that affects both communication on your teams and how that affects the outside perception. So when you go out and talk about this, like how do those preconceived notions interact with what you do?
So I think internally, when we're looking at it as a team, the fact that we have 15 people based in Nairobi and then the rest of the team here, I think we've had to work really hard to make sure that those insights from our markets are actually coming back into the product. One way that we've solved that is we use a system called circles. And so we'll pick certain key problems or challenges that we're facing, whether that's on the product side, on the portfolio side, on the customer experience side, and we'll make sure that each circle has 6 to 8 people. Half of them are going to be from the market itself, so there'll be engineers locally or someone from the customer service team, somebody from the operations team, and so we're making sure that there's a lot of fluid conversation. We also use Slack, which is allowed for a lot more transparency within the company. So literally, whether you're in Manila or you're in Nairobi or you're in Santa Monica, you're getting the same information. And what we've made, kind of made it a company mandate is the fact that, we expect people to be reading everything in Slack. And so we actually put in emojis so that we actually know whether people are reading it, and they have to just put in an emoji to make sure they're then accountable if they said they read it. That's one example. Externally, I think it's actually sharing more of the stories of people like Jennifer, I think, and really talking about the fact that what we're doing is not focusing just on subsistence living. We're actually really focusing on the emerging middle class, the people that are now moving out of that subsistence and actually looking to improve their quality of life.
Very cool.
My name's Nathan. Great platform and great work. Talk about the gap in the U.S. So you said there's 70 million Americans that aren't bankable. Are you addressing that now, and what does it look like?
So we're currently not addressing that. we want to. I think to get started as a startup for us, it was easier to go to emerging markets first. That's where my background was and my network, and so that's what we did, but we are definitely going to try to work here.
That's great.
So in Kenya, you have the advantage of M-Pesa being very entrenched there, and as you move beyond that, have you guys talked about using Bitcoin or Ethereum or anything like that to as a more global money rail system?
So we've talked about using Bitcoin more as how we would transfer capital from here to the markets we work in, but not necessarily directly to the consumer itself.
One more question. Go ahead, Eric.
I get to work with some orphans in Rwanda. I see you're hiring there. Some of them are graduating soon. They want to start transportation businesses or hair salons. How might they get connected with your product?
So one, we can definitely talk after this, but our application is on the Google Play Store, and so literally anyone who has a smartphone or an Android phone can download the product.
Awesome, awesome. Hey, Big Omaha. Hey, Shivani, thank you for coming all this way and filling us in on something you are passionate about and have actually successfully built. It's actually changing people's lives all across the world. I want to say thank you personally. And Big Omaha, can we welcome her and say thank you one more time for her work? Appreciate your time, Shivani. Really, really great. Go ahead. Thank you, Shivani. That was awesome.